God bless everybody. Today it is June 19th of 2023. This is a quick Middle East update. There's a number of stories I'd like to go over today with you. The first is we've had another area being shelled by Turkey. Um, Turkish artillery units are targeting the basic Kurds in this region over here. This had broken out a few days ago, and we've had these clashes here, and so Erdogan is still pushing this war against the Kurds. As you can see, he has basically a number of different fronts going on here, mainly in Syria, but I believe that will break out in Iraq once he starts to ground invasion Operation Claw Sword, or they may rename it because it's a new operation. But I indicated in November of this last year he had started this Operation Claw Sword against the PKK and all these different groups. As you can see, he's been doing some bombing and shelling here in the last few days, and then we've also set this base up here, and then like I say, you got to watch Herbal um, over here because we have a green zone, and that's a Kurdish capital over here, so just sort of keep an eye on that location. So the Kurds have always been the major problem for Erdogan because he feels in his mind they're a terrorist organization and they're up against his borders. They're actually in his country, and so he just ran against a pro-Kurdish leader. So he's not real happy with this situation, and now they've this is interesting because this all feeds into the Sweden NATO decision that's coming up, that I believe Erdogan will leave NATO. They're not going to allow Sweden in, so Sweden will come in. Turkey will probably leave as he's breaking this invasion out here soon because his ideology does not fit with NATO's, and he has aspirations of recreating this neo-Ottoman empire. But I just noticed that the Swedish man was charged with financing the PKK, and this was on June 9th. And so there's a lot going on here. It all revolves around the Medes or the Kurds, and if you go into Daniel 8 through 12, Darius the Mede or the Medes are indicated a number of times, so they are extremely important. And if you know who the Medes are, which are the Kurds, then you should be watching this fairly closely. One of the reasons this hasn't produced anything yet, and I think this war is coming up pretty soon, this invasion is coming up soon, is there's a number of lingering issues out here that have to be dealt with first, and Erdogan's trying to deal with them the best he can, get the best hand before he actually starts to create this problem for the Middle East. We have this deal that they've been trying to get through forever, and now it's sort of linked to this NATO Sweden vote and a number of things going on in here that Turkey wants these F-16s from the Biden administration, which is just a terrible idea. You know, they're going to be the problem coming up, and we're going to aid them by giving them F-16s as we move forward here. It's probably not a very good idea. But just as I'm going to explain here shortly in this video, we've opened up this Iranian talk again, which is going to produce nothing but misery in time as we move forward. So we're just seeing some terrible deals going forward, and I think if Turkey gets these F-16s and he gets that approval, if they get delivery fairly soon, then he'll break away, and he won't care whether we like it or not. And Erdogan's, you know, Biden keeps saying he's going to broker this deal, but Erdogan's not going to go on this one. He's ideology driven. I do believe that he's going to allow Sweden in. I think he'll leave before that happens. Even if he does let him in, I still think he's going to leave. Maybe he'll get what he wants by allowing Sweden in, and then he'll break once he gets what he needs. But he's applying pressure. This was on the 14th. This was 5 days ago. And he's rebutting these guys. He's flat out telling them, no, I'm not going to allow this to happen. And so, um, you know, there's all these things going on between Sweden, the Kurds, the Koran burning, the effigy, all this stuff going on. Erdogan's not going to be happy with allowing the Swedes into NATO, to maybe even become more of a problem for his plan later. Um, Even though NATO's dealing with Putin right now, they may have to come down here and deal with the Middle East too before long. So we'll see how that works out. So Turkey economy's been collapsing for some time. And when Erdogan got elected, his lira collapsed even more. And so they've got a real problem with their economy. And now, and this is, they're talking about actually raising interest rates, okay, which is unique because Erdogan's been lowering interest rates, inflationary period, which is exactly what opposite of what you should be doing. Okay, so he's been lowering rates, which forces people to have more money, the more capacity to borrow and different things like that. They infuse money and inflation goes up because they can't get people to stop spending money. So now that they've gone down to 8.5%, they're talking about a huge 1,150 basis point increase from 8.5% to 20% in the next week. Okay, now Volcker did a 12%. This is insanity. What's going to happen here? He's going to he's going to collapse the economy because it will shut the whole system down. No one's going to borrow at 19% when they were at 8.5%. You get what I'm saying? So this is just going to be extremely terrible for this economy. This is going to break Turkey, and that's why he's going to war, because he's got inflation of insane rate right now. And what's really weird is their inflation rate seems to be coming down even though he's reducing rates. So then all of a sudden he's going to stagnate the economy by raising it 20%, up to 20% overnight. Um, there's a reason for this. This doesn't make any sense what's going on here. And it's just going to be, and it's going to affect the foreign markets too. This will radiate out because Turkey controls a lot of the oil through the Straits of Hormuz and all these different places. They're going to affect things over here. And when their economy starts to collapse, we just had those 2 earthquakes that affected them. This is going to affect them. You got the Sweden thing affecting them. You got the Kurds affecting them. Turkey's in the news a lot. Why? Because they're a major player as we move forward. So there's a lot going on in Turkey, but there's also a lot going on in some other things that we need to look at. So Iran is praising Palestinian resistance. Okay, look, there's something going to break out here soon. Okay, between Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel, and Hamas and Hezbollah and all these groups are controlled by Iran. So when we talk about these groups, you have to just think Iran, okay, because they control everything. Iran is praising the Palestinians for resistance. Why? Because they're going against Israel right now, and they're standing effectively using 75 years of occupation of Palestinians to resist. Okay, resist, resist, resist. Okay, they're not going away. They're just going to keep ramping up this potential war against Israel. Okay, and Turkey is not going to allow Iran to decimate Israel with the Temple Mount sitting there. So this is extremely important to Turkey that they are going to intervene on this, and it indicates in the prophecy, if you go back in history, Israel cannot complete this job. They do not complete the job, and they need help. They recruit others, but they end up getting these groups turn on them. Okay, so we got to watch all these different things. But Iran is behind the original attack on Israel. Israel is going to have to retaliate. They're going to have to recruit. And when that happens, we're going to watch Turkey, Egypt, and all these other groups get into this. And it's all biblical. So if you go back and look at Jeremiah, all these prophets back in their day, it'll turn out exactly basically the same as it did in the past. So just go back, you can watch the movie of Jeremiah and see how this turns out. Watch how Nebuchadnezzar was coming down and the Jews bartered with him and they were paying him, but then they reneged and they paid the Egyptians, and the Egyptians said they'd come and help them, and then they reneged and they ran away. And what happened? Nebuchadnezzar went down, killed the Assyrian, went to Egypt, and back into Israel. It's history reproducing itself in the future, and that's exactly how it's going to happen as we move forward. But yeah, go watch the movie Jeremiah, and you'll see exactly what that is. And also, by watching Jeremiah, you'll actually see how that paradigm plays out, because it's going to play out exactly the same as it did in the past. It's going to play out in the future. You're going to see the exact picture, and that's how it's laid out in the paradigm, exactly as it was basically laid out in Jeremiah. At the end, when they're looking at the destruction, that's basically Israel is done, and we're getting ready to be taken up at that point. So just sort of watch that movie. That's a good example of what you should be watching for. And Bible will tell you everything. If you're going out of the Bible too much, then you're probably going to miss the picture, and you're going to move it into places that it shouldn't. That's why I only use the Bible, because I believe that is our only truth. And we have to take it in context of what God has given us, and not what we want to manufacture and bring into the conversation. So, and I've talked about how Afghanistan and the Taliban are going to be a major problem for Iran, because they're controlled a lot by Turkey. And so when it talks about Afghanistan and Iran's deadly border flare-ups, and they just had an incursion from the Taliban into Iran. We've been watching these border clashes between Iran and Taliban. And I've been talking about how Iran is surrounded by Turkey and their people. And so we need to keep an eye on that. These Iranian forces have moved out beyond their borders through all these proxies and different things, cause all these regional rifts and different things like that. And one of them is between Afghanistan and Iran, and that is through the Taliban. And then we donated a lot of equipment when we left there, and so the Taliban actually has some capacity at this point. But these are over water rights, and this is going to be extremely important. And I'm not a big God's controlling this picture, so you call it climate change or whatever you want. He's going to start burning up the world. He told you that he was going to do that. Even the two witnesses can control the elements and stuff when they're down here. They could shut the skies up for 3.5 years and maybe not rain. Think about that. So how are you going to survive through that? But regardless, it's over water rights, and that's the most important resource we have on the planet is water, not oil. And in this article, the Biden administration just won't give up the stupid idea of an Iranian nuclear deal, and that they're going to somehow get them to stop building this weapon that they're going to use against Iran or Israel someday. It's insane. And they just keep bringing it up, and nobody agrees with this. Everybody thinks it's basically squash. It's just worthless, because they know they're going to continue to build this capacity. And so here we go again on the 18th. We're talking about another potential nuclear deal with Iran, but we shouldn't love this. We shouldn't name the deal. And Benjamin Netanyahu's frustrated because of all these little mini deals that Biden keeps trying to throw down on this to try to make something happen here is insane. So we got all this going on in the background, and so we have now a new talks with the potential nuclear deal with Iran again. That's going to basically turn out to be worthless, I'm thinking. And this article, this is today's article. Netanyahu issues a rebuke against Biden's rumor of a nuclear mini agreement. Netanyahu doesn't like these mini agreements. He doesn't want to do this. Number one, he knows it's going to fail. It's just it's a non-starter for him. And Iran's claiming that they manufactured the first missile with a hypersonic potential capacity that they can strap a nuclear weapon to here, as they have basically the enrichment capacity to do so and build a nuclear weapon as we move forward. And we've allowed them to do this through all these stupid agreements and things, because they've never stopped their program. We just keep giving them things and they keep moving forward. And we got a poll here that indicates that in the Jerusalem Post that most Palestinians support an armed struggle against Israel. 80% of Palestinians polled say they would want the president to resign, and that they would go to war against Israel if they could potentially do that. And so there's a lot happening out here. They talk about the Lion's Den, different things like that. Gaza, all these areas are dealing with this. This is going to be a multi-front breakout war when this happens, and so keep an eye on all this. Anyway, I just wanted to fill you in on a number of these things. Turkey's going to get in this soon. They're buying for position right now. They're buying for weapons. They're buying for a way to get their economy from basically uncollapsing. And you watch when he raises those rates to 20%, it's going to send shockwaves through the markets, because they're sort of a hub in the Middle East. They control a lot through the Black Sea and different things like that. So just keep an eye on that. And we're moving into July. And oh yes, there is one other thing I want to talk to you about. So in July, we may have an issue with the fiat currency, because the dollar strength is destroying the foreign markets. They're moving away from the petrodollar, and they're talking about what they call the Fed now. This is a Federal Reserve. This Fed service, or Fed Now, is a service developed by the Federal Reserve or depository institutions in the United States that will enable individuals, businesses to send and receive instant payments. Okay, now watch as we move through this. Okay, banks will be able to build products on top of the FedNow platform. FedNow is scheduled to begin a formal certification of participants in a program in April 23. So they've already rolled this out. I talked about that, and they're going to launch it in July of 23. Interesting. It will operate 24 hours, 365-day basis, and as opposed to the U.S. government currency system that closes on weekends or holidays, stock market, different things like that. FedNow transaction costs are expected to be about 1/5 the cost. They're going to push everybody into the system, and they tell you what the transaction fee is. But look at this. The Clearinghouse Payments Company in 2017, a private entity-owned association of large U.S. banks, introduced RTP, real-time payments, okay? And they've been doing this since the late 2010s. And if you look at Gensler the other day, he came out and said, well, all currencies are digital, don't you know? Well, yeah, because they don't print that many dollars. Look, the digits go in the bank, digits go to the Fed, digits come back. It's not really cash moving hands. They're digits. It's all digital. So in 2010, the Association of Large Banks unsuccessfully lobbied the government to prevent the Federal Reserve from deploying this competing FedNow service. Why? Because they knew it was going to change the landscape. And think how this is going to affect the regional banks if the Fed controls everything through their currencies. This CBDC currency they're going to create and implement on you. While smaller banks and financially technology companies encourage the Fed to proceed with the FedNow's development. So some people are on board, some people aren't on board. And look at this. Instant payments address most of the problems that the central bank digital currency CBDC would solve. But then look at this. However, FedNow is not a CBDC yet, because it is not liable to the federal government yet. Okay, so they don't own it yet, but they're going to. It's coming soon, folks. God bless everybody. Have a great night. Find the open door. Find Jesus.